Today we're going to be completing the last piece of the shift pattern for the 16-inch LON Wild doll. Since I'm still in the process of completing the pattern, I'm just showing the Poppy Parker cover as an example, and this is the coat that we're actually going to make. This is a super easy coat. It actually has the sleeves cut on to the front and the back, and the only external pieces are the collar and then these little tab pockets at the side. So this is our main coat piece, and as you can see, the sleeve is cut on. This is the front of the coat and this is the back. The lining is just cut one, and the external part of the coat is also cut one. Then we just simply have the collar piece, which is kind of a large fold over collar, and then a couple of pockets to go on the front to add some detail. So we're going to get started with the collar, and all we're going to do is put it right sides together and sew each of the short sides, and then we're going to turn it right side out and give it a press. All right, now we're just going to clip in towards that seam allowance to create the point of that front of the collar, and then just trim some of it away. Then we'll press it right sides out, and we'll get it attached by basting it to the neck edge of the coat. All right, before we baste it to the neck edge of the coat, we're just going to take a few clips in towards the curved edge. That's just going to help to ease the collar into the coat. Now here's our piece. So we're going to do the same thing here. So we're just going to take a few clips in towards the rounded edge of the collar. And you can see on the pattern piece that we're going to stop the collar at the dot at the front of the coat. So you want to sew it in place and make sure that the finished edge of the collar stops at this dot. You're going to make sure to match the center of the collar to the center back of the coat when you're pinning it in place. Once you have the collar in place, you'll notice that there's an equal distance of coat past the finished edge of the collar on each side. That's very important. Once you have the collar basted in place, you just want to make sure that everything looked good on the opposite side and that you don't have any unusual tucks or puckers in the back. So that looks pretty good so far. All right, I would do just one more little clip in towards this collar, just so that you can make sure that it's going to be able to turn. All right, now that we have that done, all we're going to do is start putting the lining to the coat, right sides together, and we're going to sew along the sleeve edge. That's going to be the next step. All right, now that we have the sleeve edge sewn on both of the coat sleeves, we're going to go ahead and just press that seam open. That's just so that when we turn it, we have a nice crisp edge at the cuff. And then we're going to go ahead and keep the coat pinned right sides together. And the next step will be to come up the front openings around the neck and down the other side. All right, once you have that sewn up both front openings and around the neck edge, we're going to clip in towards the seam allowance, especially around the curved edge and also at that front point. And we're going to make sure that we press those seams open as best we can before we go on to the next step, which is going to be to sew the side seams. And we're going to do that by pulling the lining to the lining and the coat to coat. And I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. All right, so here's the progress so far, and it's looking fine. So for the next step, we're going to do the side seams of the lining and the coat. So we're going to open the garment up, and we're actually going to match the lining to the lining at the cuff and the coat to the coat at the cuff. And then we're going to pin it all the way around, and you're going to be forming 2 circles here. And you're going to sew up the side seams and all the way around. So let me get it pinned and show you what it looks like when it's ready to be sewn. All right, now I have the lining pinned to the lining and the coat pinned to the coat, as you can see here. So it does create this circle, and you want to see that on both sides. Now, what I did do is I went ahead and I marked with my heat erasable marker as a reminder that I'm going to leave an opening in the side lining seam to turn the garment right side out, because the last step before we finish is to go ahead and do the hem, and then we're going to turn it through this side opening of the inside of the lining. So let's go ahead and sew each side seam with that part being unsewn, and then we'll finish up with that hem seam next, and I'll show you how to turn the coat. All right, so we have our first side seam sewn, as you can see, all the way around. And now we're just going to repeat that on the second side, leaving the opening in the lining to turn the coat. All right, so here's our opening, and I did a little back stitching to reinforce that so we don't pull the seams open when we turn the coat. So it's right here, and then we finish both sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip into the underarm seam because the coat is cut in one piece, and then I'm going to trim the seam allowance a little bit, and I'm going to press those seams open as best I can before I actually sew the hem edge. Now that we have the seams pressed open for the most part, what we're going to do is just sew the hem edge of the coat. So you're going to pin it with right sides together, and then once we have that finished, we're almost finished with the coat with the exception of adding the decorative pockets at the front. All right, so all we're going to do now is clip into that seam allowance, turn the coat right side out through that lining in the side opening, and then we're going to get this pressed and start preparing the pockets. We are making excellent progress on this coat, and like I said, it's just a few steps and it's a pretty nice finish. So what we're going to do next is we're just going to go back to that opening where we turned the coat, and you may have noticed that it took a little while for me to get it turned, so you want to leave this opening a little bit larger maybe than I had originally, just to make it easier to turn. So I'm just going to hand stitch this opening closed, and then I'm going to work on finishing up the pockets and applying it to the coat. Then we're going to get a few photographs on the doll, and we're already done. All right, so for the pockets, we just have two. We're just going to place the pieces right sides together and sew up and around the top, leaving one edge open. Then we're going to turn that one edge under and press it, and then we're just going to apply the pocket by flipping that top edge down to create the flap, and put a few decorative buttons on it, and our coat will be finished. You will take the raw edge of the pocket and just tuck it in, and that's actually going to be the bottom of the pocket when you place it onto the front of the coat. Once you have the pockets positioned on the coat where you want them, as indicated on the pattern, you can use that as a reference. You're going to go ahead and just sew the pockets in place, and then we're going to get a few decorative buttons sewn on, and we're almost done. Thank you so much for joining me today for the easy construction of the shift coat for Ella Wild. If you'd like to see how to make the shift top or the leggings that she's wearing in the photographs, I'll link that in the description below. I really appreciate you guys. Please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.